Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining me today. My name is Andrew Daphne, and I'm the Instruction and Outreach Librarian at the New Jersey State Library, and I will be giving the presentation today on interviewing tips and tricks. Before we get started, some housekeeping items to go through. I'll be taking questions at the end of the program today, so please, if you have any questions, you can submit them using the question box in the GoToWebinar dashboard. You can submit them at any time, and then I will take care of them at the end of the program. There is a copy of the presentation today available for download, and you can find that in the handout section of the dashboard. If you're using Google Chrome, it is possible that the PDF will not download correctly, but that is all dependent upon the settings you have in Chrome. So you can try using another browser if you wish, or everyone who registered will receive a copy of the presentation and a follow-up email. So there will be a survey at the end of this program, as well as in a follow-up email. If you can please complete that, I would be greatly appreciative. I really take them seriously and do use them to help develop our future programs. So if you're looking for more information regarding interview skills, there is a link on the screen right now. It is a shortened link, but it is for the New Jersey Career Connections put out by the Department of Labor. New Jersey Career Connections is the Department of Labor's attempt to kind of build up a variety of resources aimed at starting a career, working in a career, searching for jobs, developing skills, basically anything related to career advancement, development, job hunting, things like that. So you can find that out at careerconnectionsnj.gov. But this link right here will take you specifically to the interview section, and I will make sure everybody gets a copy of that link in the follow-up email as well. For those of you who are not familiar to GoToWebinar, this is what your dashboard should look like. If you do not see this dashboard, look for this orange box with a white arrow, either at the top left or right-hand side of your screen. That button will open and close the dashboard, and it's possible that the dashboard loaded closed on you. Also, if you are going back and forth between programs, you may lose the dashboard. You can do that by either clicking the GoToWebinar icon on the taskbar at the bottom of your page, or using the alternate tab on a Windows or the command tab on a Mac to kind of switch between programs. So if you're having any problems, can't figure anything out, you can use this raise hand button here, and that'll alert me that there's an issue. I am the only one on today, so please bear with me if I try to take just a moment to deal with some technical issues. The most common thing is people are not able to hear audio. So if that is the case, please look at the speakers section here and see what is listed here as the speaker, and make sure that that matches to the active speaker that you are using. It's possible that sometimes if you plug in an external device, GoToWebinar does not switch over to that. So please match the speakers that are active on your computer to what's here to make sure that you hear it. You can always step out of the webinar, relaunch it, and sometimes that fixes the problem. So as I said, there's a handout for today, and you can find in this handout section here. And again, if you have any questions, please type them in this question area here, hit send, and that'll get sent to me. So without further ado, we can get started. So today, the objectives for today are to identify the important steps to prepare for an interview, identify the major key points of the interview process, recognize and answer popular interview questions. Then we'll talk about the SHARP and SOAR methods for answering different types of questions. And lastly, we'll round up everything with how interviewing has changed in the age of COVID-19 and some things to look out for. So before we go any further, I just want to get some information from you. So I will be launching a poll. If you could please complete that, and then we can move on. I just kind of want to get a sense of where everybody's at in their job or their career right now. All right, so it looks like we have a variety of attendees today. It looks like a majority of you are currently employed, possibly not seeking any further employment. Some of you are unemployed. So I think everybody will be able to get something out of this. It's always good to be prepared, especially now with how the world is. Things can change on a dime, and being able to be prepared and adapted to the situation if need be is important. So even for those who are currently employed, one of my old bosses, her husband had a great take, and he was constantly interviewing for jobs, regardless if he wanted the position or not. And his reasoning is that he needed to keep his skills up, and he never knew what was going to happen, and he wanted to make sure that he was always on top of things and able to feel comfortable in any situation should something happen to his job and he needs to go somewhere else. So it's something to think about as we all move forward. So, all right. So what are the types of interviews that you may encounter? Usually there are four types. There's the in-person interview. There's a panel interview, which can be in a virtual or phone, or it could even be in an in-person format. There's the online interview, which we'll talk about a lot more later. And then there's the phone interview. So it's possible you may have one or all of these in any interview process, but I would say before COVID-19, the most popular things would be some type of initial phone interview. That is basically just somebody calling you and seeing if you're interested in the position still, and probably to set up maybe a time for an in-person interview, or just to kind of gauge your interest before they move on to the next round of selections. So some brief etiquette with a phone interview. You do not have to take the call immediately when it comes in. If you're driving, if you're busy, it's okay to let it go to voicemail. You want to make sure you're able to give the person who has called you the time and attention that it deserves. So if you're driving, you can pull over if you feel like that's necessary to take the call, but you can always call them back when it's convenient for you. They understand that. So. With a panel interview, you will be usually in front of 3 or more people. It could be from different departments. If you are working in a larger organization, it could be, a department head, your supervisor, and maybe an HR representative. So it's a wide variety, and they usually have their own questions that they will ask you. This is a popular way to interview people. I've had several panel interviews. In my past, and it usually goes pretty well. So there's not too much there. It would be as the same thing as a one-on-one interview or an in-person interview. You kind of want to use the same etiquette and strategies that we'll be talking about later. So let's go over the interview process now. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the preparation or the preliminary interview. One of the most important things to do at this point is to really have a good sense of what your short and long-term career goals are. If you don't know what you want or where you want to go, how are you able to tell somebody else that in an effective way? So one of the most important things to do before any interview, and even when you're start looking for a job, is to kind of figure out where you are, where you want to be, maybe what your skill sets are, what sets you apart, your strengths and weaknesses. Really do a deep internal reflection on yourself. That way you're able to better describe a lot of things and kind of have a better focus when it comes to the interview and the variety of questions that you may be asked. In the preliminary interview, again, that's probably just going to see if you're still interested in the position and possibly to set up an in-person or a more formal interview. At that point, it's just being enthusiastic about the job. If you still want it, if it's for a reason you don't want it, you can certainly say no, and that is the end of that. But make sure that you show enthusiasm, and they may ask you just a couple questions about maybe your current work environment, where you're working, kind of a general description of what you do. So having like an elevator pitch essentially, where you're basically just talking about maybe one or two important points about you. Having something like that prepared or ready is a good way to introduce yourself during the preliminary interview. When you get into the formal interview, generally there's these four kind of stages to it. There's the greeting, where there'll be some pleasantries. You'll know who you're talking to. They'll know about you, and kind of maybe some small talk to get everybody situated and comfortable with each other before the actual interview starts. There's the personal summary. Usually at this point, they'll ask you, so tell me a little bit about yourself, or what is it, where are you working now? What are you doing now? And then this is something that is usually pretty brief. It's just to get an idea of who you are, see if what you're saying kind of matches up to your resume. And you want to keep this, even though it's a personal summary, you want to keep this as professional as possible. And we will talk about that when we look at the SHARP method of answering questions. Then comes really the meat of the interview, the job-related questions. Those are going to be talking about specifically what you are currently doing or what you've done in the past, how those have applied to maybe your strengths and weaknesses. You can bring those in. You can also talk about, they're looking for maybe projects or accomplishments, or even issues that you've had to deal with, or problems that you've had to solve. So this is really where they're looking to see how you fit into the position that they're offering, their organization. And this is really where you're going to want to start highlighting things in your resume and your cover letter to showcase why you are the best candidate for this job. And then there's going to be a wrap up where you will have a chance to ask any questions of them. They may provide you a little bit more information about the job or benefits or things like that, depending on if it's an in-person. Sometimes they'll give you a tour as a way to kind of wrap things up, let you kind of get a feel for things. And then it's usually a goodbye, and they'll usually give you some information about when they will contact you regarding any follow-up. And then on your end, there is the follow-up section of the interview, and this usually happens about 2 days after and 2 weeks after. So about 2 days after, you just want to send a brief thank you to whoever interviewed you, saying that you're still interested, you thank you for their consideration, and you look forward to hearing from them soon. And then if you don't hear anything in about 2 weeks, you can send a second follow-up, just saying that you're still interested in the position, and you're just wondering where the search is, and if there's anything else that they need from you. Always offer to provide them any extra information should they need it. And that way it's still showing that you're enthusiastic, you're interested, and that may set you apart from somebody else who just says, okay, thank you, and they're done, and then they just sit there waiting for a phone call. So it's always good to follow up, continuing to show that you're interested in offering to provide them any additional information should something come up that they may have a question on, or there may be some piece of information that they maybe forgot to get from you. So it's always good to try and be proactive. So, all right. So let's go a little bit deeper into preparing for the interview. As I said, have a basic understanding of your career goals. And now we're going to familiar yourself with some common interview questions and how you would answer them. This is where comes into mock interviews, whether you do it in some professional environment. There are companies and groups out there that'll provide these services, sometimes free, sometimes for a fee, or you can do it with a family member or a friend or a coworker. You really want to figure out, maybe the top 10 interview questions and figure out how you're going to answer them. Being somewhat prepared, you don't want to be scripted, but you want to be somewhat prepared when you go in, so you're not fumbling around trying to find answers. It just shows that you're maybe not taking this as seriously as they would have hoped. And it's going to allow you to create a positive environment for yourself where you're feeling confident in yourself to answer these questions. And it's going to set a good tone for the interview moving forward. Be prepared to discuss everything on your resume or cover letter, even if it's something that seems maybe irrelevant to the position or the job or the organization that you're applying for. If it's on either your resume or cover letter, you have to be prepared to discuss it. When I first got into the library field myself, before that I was working in the post office, and after a few jobs in the library field, when I was applying for the job I currently have now, they brought up something about my post office, and it took me a little bit by surprise that they would ask me something like that, but it had to do with like customer interactions and relationships and things like that, and dealing with situations, because you're as a clerk, as a mailman, something like that, as I was, you are in the face of the public. You are dealing one-on-one with people. And so in a library, you're also going to be dealing one-on-one with people. So they wanted to see how I was handling situations in that environment as a way to gauge how I would act and respond to things in the library environment. It was not something I was prepared for. And if I took some time, prepped, and really looked at it, I would have been able to maybe not be caught off guard. So just be aware of that. If it's something that you have written down somewhere, have given them, it's fair game to be asked or discussed. Lastly, ensure you are well rested. The interview process can be nerve-wracking, and as a result, you can get maybe anxious beforehand. That can kind of wear you down a little bit. You may not feel as sharp as you were. It may take you a couple times. You may start fumbling over your words a little bit. So just ensuring that you're well rested before the interview will really go a long way to kind of boost your own self-confidence and make sure that you're alert enough and you have the mental faculties to kind of deal with maybe some left field questions or things that maybe you weren't expecting. So. Also, before the interview, research the organization, the company, the group, whatever that you're applying for. That's probably one of the best ways to prepare, is to become familiar with them. Look over their website for mission statements, strategic visions, press releases, anything that's going to give you insight into the organization, what they're about, what they're looking for. And this way you can kind of tailor your answers to things that are important to them. They will have goals and values stated, and if you can tie in your what you're going to do, your ideas to those goals, it's going to make you a better candidate. For me personally, when I was applying for the job at the state library, I looked over their strategic vision for the next 5 years, and I knew I had to do a presentation, so I tailored my presentation to hit some of those goals that were mentioned in the strategic plan, to show that if you bring me on, yes, I can do the job that you're asking me, but this is how I'm going to work into the larger view of the library, what they're looking for, and things like that. So also, it demonstrates that you're interested in working there. You're not just there just to have a job. That may be the case. You may just want to get out and you're just looking for something new, but showing that you know a little bit more about the company or the organization demonstrates interest, shows that you're motivated, shows that you might take the extra step or the extra time to go above and beyond. And that's something that might not be communicated directly, but if you're able to work things in like that, they will definitely pick up on that. By researching the organization, you should also be prepared to ask questions to the interviewers about it, to clarify any concerns that you may have, to demonstrate more interest, to kind of get a feel of the work environment, what is expected of you. When I was applying for a job at I believe it was Strayer University, in charge of their kind of what they called a learning center, which was kind of their library and some other things. The question I asked them was, what does your enrollment look like? Is it increasing or decreasing? And I had the interviewer stumped. They didn't know how to answer it. They said, that's a very good question. Nobody's ever asked that type of question before, and they didn't know. And the reason I was asking that was because I wanted to know if this was something that was feasible. If this was something that was going to be around for 2 years, and then if their enrollments were dropping, well, library things might be something that they would cut. If their enrollment is increasing, that might mean I'm going to get more funding. And so I needed to be able to prepare for that. So it's really good to kind of figure out what the company or the organization is doing and ask questions that shows your interest, but also maybe helps you determine if this is a good fit for you. So sources like Glassdoor.com and LinkedIn, they can give you valuable insight into the organization. So use third-party sites or resources if possible, and in conjunction with the website of the group that you're applying for. That way you can get a more well-rounded understanding of the organization too. When I was first coming out of college, I got a phone call for somebody saying that they came across my resume on one of the resume sites and they thought I would be a good fit for their sales. Well, I looked into it a little more, did a little bit more research, and found out that it was kind of a scam where you basically do door-to-door sales and it's based on commission. And for some sketchy practices in the past, this person has been kicked out of quote unquote a few states before they landed in Pennsylvania, where I was living at the time. So doing that extra research alerted me to this and said, well, this might not be something that I'm interested in. So we'll talk about some social media etiquette now. Some organizations, and I believe more and more now with the ubiquitous nature of social media and the variety of platforms that are out there, might investigate or look you up on social media before looking at your application or before inviting you to an interview. So try to keep all of your accounts professional or private. That's perfectly acceptable too. So try to avoid any embarrassing and inappropriate photos. Try to avoid conversations that may be inappropriate or controversial, or liking, sharing posts that may be considered that. Avoid comments about your current or previous employers or supervisors. I know sometimes we just need to vent and we're just really frustrated, and a lot of our communication now can be digital and we're communicating with friends or family over these platforms. If those conversations are private, that's fine, but just be sure, because if they're public, nobody's going to want to hire anybody who has that type of or exhibits that type of behavior or so free willingly shares thoughts like that. So I can tell you that my wife, she runs a community center and she deals with a lot of teenagers for lifeguards and party people and things like that. And she will look at every application that comes in, anybody who she's considering, she will go and she will look them up on Facebook, on Instagram, just to see if it's something that would be a good fit for her. So, but I do know that more and more places are doing that. I've read reports and articles about that. So just be aware of what your social media presence looks like. A little sidebar with that with LinkedIn. A lot of people have questions on LinkedIn. Should they sign up for it? What is really LinkedIn? How does that play into the whole social media narrative? And LinkedIn I see as a professional Facebook. So you're there, but it's for professional purposes only. Yes, if you want to connect with other people that you know, that's fine, but it's not anything to be used personally. It's not like you're having conversation with friends. It's there to really demonstrate your professional nature, your job history, the connections that you've made with clients, with other organizations, with sponsors, with corporate or nonprofit partners, things like that. That's really what it's looking for. One of my friends who's an athletic trainer for a school, he has that listed on his LinkedIn, but he also has a third party athletic training company that he runs too. And his LinkedIn is all about promoting that company. There is nothing personal on there. Everything he does is related to anything to boost awareness of the company that he's running, all the events that they're doing, conferences that he's attended, and things like that. So that's really what LinkedIn is. And while it's not necessary you have one, it doesn't hurt to have one and to share it. There's also a question on resumes, whether you should include a LinkedIn profile. You can, if you want to include your LinkedIn address on there, that's fine. Just make sure it's completely professional and that it's up to date too. All right, so now let's look at some key interview points. All right. So interviews can be formal and informal, so always be prepared. This could be something as simple as, you know, the idea of the elevator pitch, where you are in an elevator with somebody and you're interested in a job, or somebody might think, oh, hey, did you see about this position? Are you interested? That's a very informal type of interview, but you need to be prepared by something. Say, oh yeah, I think I can do that. I think my performance in so-and-so position has been adequate enough, and I think I'm prepared. Something as simple as that. It can be something as simple, again, as the phone interview, where it's just a kind of an introductory interview conversation that it's somewhat informal. You're not sitting down face to face going through all these questions, but you need to be prepared for that to be able to answer maybe a couple brief questions. So just be aware of where you're applying, keep track of it. Some people like to create a log of all the places they applied for and when, and some information such as in a spreadsheet or maybe a Word document, or they create separate folders on their computer for each job that they're applying for, including their application, the resume or cover letter that they sent out. So that way they know what they've sent out and are better able to respond to an informal type of situation. Stay positive regardless. Being confident in yourself is key to making a good and lasting impression. So, and that's especially difficult when you're asked to critically evaluate yourself. What are your weaknesses? Tell us about a time when, something maybe negative happened and how you were able to handle that. It's okay to turn a negative into a positive, and you want to always do that. It's okay to say that, maybe you are distracted, or, sometimes you get overwhelmed, but I've taken these steps to improve that aspect. I've done these professional development classes, or I've been working through different tips, or anything, anything to show that what might be considered a weakness, you're seeing as a positive, because it's a positive way to improve yourself. And that's a great way to kind of flip that question. And that's really what they're looking for in that. They're looking for how you can turn negative things into positives, how you can critically evaluate yourself in that, and kind of be impartial, but show that you're able to plan things out, that you're able to kind of look for solutions. And part of that is just being positive. And by that, you're going to be confident in yourself. And that's going to help create a better environment in the interview, where things are going to be moving forward, and you're going to feel more confident in yourself. You're going to be able to answer questions more thoroughly. You're not going to be using a lot of filler words then to try and figure out or think about situations or the best ways to answer something. A common topic or question that gets brought up a lot is salary. And the overall consensus is do not talk about salary at the interview unless the interviewer brings it up first. They may say, at the end, that the salary is, this is the range. Is this something you're interested in, or what would you be looking for in a salary? Employers can no longer ask about your previous salary in New Jersey. That's the law. So if they ask you, so what were you making before, you can say, I prefer not to answer that. And that's perfectly acceptable. So, but again, it's proper etiquette just to not talk about salary. It can be frustrating to not bring this up, especially a lot of places might not post a salary. They may say it's competitive benefits or a competitive salary, but you don't know what the actual number is. So there are a couple ways around that. One, you can call their HR department, and you don't have to give a name. You just say, I'm interested in this position. I didn't see a salary posted. Could you please tell me what the range is for that? So that's a good way to find out even before you go into the interview, because at that point, if the money isn't there for you, and that's something that's important to you, then it's not worth your time or effort to do the interview or waste their time. I had that happen. I was looking at a job out in Pittsburgh when I was starting out, and it was base salary, but I asked even before the interview, I said, is there an opportunity for advancement here? Because I'm going to be moving out there. I'd have to come out there for the interview. They were refusing to do a phone or a online interview. And before I even said that, before I committed, I said, well, what's the advancement opportunity? They're like, oh, we're really just looking for somebody to fill this position. They're not really looking for anybody to move up, just a long-term person just to kind of sit in this, this low-level position. I said, well, thank you. I don't think that's going to fit me or my goals, but I appreciate your time. So it's okay to kind of talk about those things, but you have to do it sometimes in a roundabout way. So, and always ask pertinent questions to demonstrate your interest in the job and the organization. You may get sidetracked, and that may be up to the interviewer to sidetrack you based off maybe a personal hobby or maybe a volunteer group, if you include volunteer information on your resume, to go off if there's a shared interest there. But when it comes to you asking the questions and things about answering questions specifically related to your experiences or your jobs, stay on target. All right, don't get off into the weeds. And while it may seem like you're developing a rapport with them that is friendly, They're there to do a job and you're there to apply for a job. So, all right, let's talk about some now popular questions before we get into the methods for kind of tackling interview questions. So you're going to encounter a wide variety of questions depending on maybe the career, the profession you're looking at. There may be some specific questions related to that. There may be questions related to different performance benchmarks. There may be questions that are more abstract. I've heard of tech companies out in California asking questions like how many windows are there in New York City. It seems like it has nothing to do with the job, but they're looking for your critical thinking skills and how you break down a question, how you go about breaking down a problem, figuring out different aspects of it, and coming up with a solution. But the most common questions that you will probably encounter in almost every interview include things like, tell me about yourself, what are your strengths and weaknesses, where do you see yourself in a certain amount of years, or tell me or us about a time when, and that can be either something positive, something negative, and it usually has something specifically related to the position, to an aspect of your previous work, or something that might be considered a soft skill like communication, conflict resolution, something like that. So these questions tend to be at the beginning of the interview and kind of set the stage for how they feel about you. They're kind of getting an understanding of who you are as a candidate, as a professional person, before they start really diving into the resume and looking to maybe ask you to explain different parts of your resume, or maybe things that are your education, things like that. So being familiar with these, as we said before, and setting a good tempo at the beginning will then create a positive environment for you, build up your confidence, and really set you off on the right foot in developing a good rapport with the people or person that is interviewing you. So let's talk about some things that you should never answer. And again, some of these are illegal to ask, but there may be ways that they will try to glean this information from you. So do not answer questions related to your age, your marital status or family members, race, color, religion, or national origin, sex, gender identity, or sexual orientation, anything relating to disability, citizenship, pregnancy, and again, now your current salary or benefits. These are illegal questions for them to ask you during the interview process. Some jobs will ask about citizenship specifically on applications, and that's like a yes or no, and that might or might not prevent you from moving forward in the position, but they're just looking to see if maybe then you would need to provide extra documentation if you're not a citizen, but they in the interview process cannot ask these questions. If they ask these directly or indirectly and you do not wish to answer, which is your right, politely deny the answer to answer them and instead shift the focus back to the job. A great way to do this is, I'm not comfortable talking about my family right now, but I really like to get back to talking about the skills that I can bring to improve your organization or your group, or how I feel that I'm the best candidate for this position. So you're just redirecting it back to the purpose of the interview, which is to figure out if you are the best candidate to fill that job and to fit in with that organization. All right, let's talk about two methods now. We have the SHARP method and the SOAR method. So first, we're going to talk about the SHARP method. And this is designed to polish your answers to more general or informational questions. And these generally happen at the beginning part of the interview. Tell me about yourself, tell me an experience when, what are your strengths and weaknesses. And SHARP is a mnemonic device that stands for specific, honest, appropriate, relevant, and positive. So when you are answering these more general informational questions, you want to provide specific answers or specific examples for things. You want to be honest. If you're trying to make up something to make you sound better or to inflate something, you're going to start pausing. You're going to start breaking eye contact. You're going to start doing little things that with your body language that these people may pick up on, and therefore they might say, well, this might not be the most honest answer. And this is also a great way to be familiar with your resume and cover letter. Make sure that if you're saying anything, you're being honest, it's going to be on the cover letter or resume. You do not want to contradict that. Make sure it's appropriate. Make sure it's answering the question at hand. You're not giving away too much information about an issue you had with a supervisor or a coworker. Try to be appropriate and specifically targeting what they want answered. Make sure, again, it's relevant to the question, it's relevant to the job or the experiences that you've had, or maybe your own personal beliefs. Sometimes they ask you more philosophical questions, like what's your philosophy of education? That's a common one for teachers, where they have to go down and think about, all right, well, what do I feel like the purpose of education is? Where do children fit into this? What about psychology and developmental things and cognitive things? Like all of that is an example, but you want to make sure that it's relevant to the question. And stay positive. Again, always try to put yourself in the best light, even if you have to evaluate yourself or talk about something that might not be one of your strong points. So let's look at an example of this. All right, so let's do the tell me about yourself question. In this example, the interviewee said, well, I'm a mother of 2 beautiful daughters and married to my wonderful husband of 15 years. We love to go camping and spend our free time being physically active. I used to work at big tech pharmaceuticals in their research division, but they never listened to anything I had to say, so I quit. But I really like helping people, so I volunteer with my church a lot. It's a little bit different now that we don't have a chat or an in-person, so to kind of go over what's wrong with this response. So I'm just going to point out a few things that is wrong here. So first off, there is really nothing professional about this answer. The only thing related to their career or their work history is that they used to work at big tech pharmaceuticals in their research division. They don't talk about any of the tasks that they had to perform. They didn't even mention what their job title was. They didn't say how long they were there. And they followed that up with, but they never listened to anything I had to say, so I quit. So they're directly kind of talking about negative experiences that they had with somebody else. And that's just not a good way to start this off. While yes, you may be proud that you're a mother of 2 beautiful daughters and you're married to your wonderful husband of 15 years, again, that has nothing to do with you as a candidate, what you can do for the job, what you can do for the organization. And so it's really irrelevant to them. Plus, now you are bringing in aspects for them to kind of look at. Well, you have 2 beautiful daughters, you're married to a husband of 15 years. They may start thinking about things. You may say that I'm just recently married. If you're a female, then you're like, okay, well, maybe she's wanting to start a family now. So maybe she will get pregnant in a few years. Is that something we want to do, is dealing with maternity leave? Again, you're providing more information and irrelevant information at that point. Yes, you love to go camping and spend your free time being physically active, but again, that has nothing to do with the job. It's more about you personally. And if that's something that gets brought up later in the interview, if for whatever reason, you can certainly work that in as a brief sidebar, as a brief note to something, but it's not something you want to do as you're introducing yourself. And again, I really like helping people out, so I volunteer with my church a lot. Then you're kind of opening up the door there to bring religion into this, and depending on the job and who's interviewing, things like that, you're just opening up a topic that is not necessarily and may be a hindrance to you. So there's a lot of things that are wrong with this response. So let's take a look now at a more appropriate response to this type of question using the SHARP method. All right. I was a laboratory technician at big tech pharmaceuticals for 4 years in their research division. Primarily, I was responsible for entering data sets and researching current medical patents and chemical standards. I worked closely with scientists and was involved in the development of a drug, a procedure, some type of research they would include in there. Before big tech, I worked as a research assistant at the Cancer Research Center of Medical University while I finished my master's degree in chemical engineering. There, I assisted PhD students and doctors in preparing laboratory equipment for use and ordering supplies. This is a very, very nice snapshot of who this person is as a professional, what their job history is, what the skills that they have, um, their past employment, how long they've been there, some things or accomplishments that they've done. This is really what they're looking for, and it hits on all of the aspects of the SHARP method. It's specific. Specifically, they were a laboratory technician, specifically for 4 years. They were specific in their responsibilities, which included entering data sets, researching medical patents and standards. Again, before that, they were specific. I worked here, and this was my position, and this is who I worked with and what I did. They were honest. There was nothing dishonest here. These are all facts. And this would all be then backed up by what they have on their resume. So they would be able to check to see the years that you listed that you were working at big tech pharmaceuticals and see if that matched up. They would be able to see if your job titles matched up and the skills or the duties that you had, if those matched up. It's all being honest. It's very appropriate and it's very relevant to the position at hand for them. And it's positive. It might not seem positive, but just saying that I was involved in the development of something, it shows your contribution, you're being positive. It shows that you're being positive with other people. I've worked with PhD students and doctors. So you're showing yourself as in a positive environment, in a positive light, and showing what makes you the best candidate in a really brief answer for this job, and kind of allows then the interviewers to take pieces of this and then work that into further questions and kind of develop the flow of the interview moving forward. All right, so let's now take a look at the SOAR method. And this is designed to help you answer questions that really focus on your experiences or how you handle conflicts or problems. And this SOAR stands for situation, obstacles, action, and result. In these types of questions, there really is no right answer, but really what they're looking for when they ask these questions is your decision-making skills, your critical thinking skills, your communication skills, your interpersonal skills. So they're really looking to see how you can apply yourself in a variety of situations that you may find may find yourself in the position you're applying for. So when answering these questions, again, you're going to bring up a specific situation that you're going to talk about. Then you're probably going to be talking about the obstacles or whatever issues there were that led to this situation, whether it was somebody else that caused it, or maybe there was just a general breakdown in communication. What was the obstacle that you had to deal with? And you're going to talk about what action or actions you took to resolve the problem. It could be setting up a meeting to further discuss things. It could be reevaluating workflows or procedures to see maybe where something it was lacking. It could be talking to somebody, if it was a customer or a client, specifically sitting down with them, getting more information out of them, instead of just assuming something that either your supervisor or a colleague told you. You're trying to figure out what was going on. Then what was the result? And the result does not always have to be positive. You would like it to be. You want to pick the best instances to showcase how you effectively handled these experiences. But sometimes there is not a positive result to some things. But you want to make sure that you talk about the result, how that result came about, and then maybe either how that result was implemented or how that result led to more communication or something that came from that result. So let's take a look at an example. All right, tell me about a time when you had to deal with a difficult situation at work. What was the final outcome? Again, so this is going back to the other example of the woman who worked at big tech pharmaceuticals. Well, there were a lot of problems I had at my last job with my supervisor, who would just never listen to me. He thought just because he was a scientist that he could just ignore what I said. I told him that there was a better way to enter the data, but he just dismissed me. I knew I was right, so I just did it my way because I wanted to make sure the data was entered correctly and more efficiently. So let's take a look at what is wrong with this type of response. So there is a problem here. So there's obviously two issues here. There's an issue between a supervisor and the employee that deals with maybe communication, lack of respect in some instance. And then there's also the issue of finding a problem or a better way to enter this data and figure out how to resolve that issue. So one of the things we said in the beginning is you do not want to talk bad about previous employers, supervisors at all during your interview. And again, here is a perfect example of this might have been really frustrating. This might have been the last straw that pushed you to quit or search for another job. But this is not the place, excuse me, or the time to talk about it. And it's really going to start turning people off to you. They show that you really can't handle yourself, that you might be more angry, you don't know how to communicate, and it's just a very bad way to talk about a very relevant situation. That is a great example to use when answering this question. So let's start talking about now what we can do to improve this response. All right. While I worked very well with my colleagues, my supervisor did not like the way I entered the data. I explained to him that I found a better way to enter the data, but he was skeptical of the new method. I was able to demonstrate to him that by entering the data in a different way, I was able to cut down the data entry time by 25% and capture another element of the data that may be useful if the results need to be replicated. As a result, we were able to finish the research ahead of schedule and save the company some money. So now let's take a look at this answer and how it is a much better way of talking about this situation. So they are showing that there was a conflict. So there is a situation. The situation did not work well with my supervisor because he did not like the way they enter the data. The other situation was that there was a better way to enter the data. All right. What was the obstacle? Figuring out how to implement that new way of entering the data. All right, so what was the action? I was demonstrating. Now, it might have been that this person just went ahead and did it, and at the end, it all worked out because it worked well. They got the results that they wanted, and the scientists then may have said, well, I figured this out. This was my idea, this was my team, got all the credit, but you're not saying anything like that. You're using very specific words to describe a situation in a more positive way. So the way of using the word skeptical of the new method, instead of saying that there was an outright conflict and he didn't like it and he dismissed me, he was skeptical of the way. All right, so that's a great kind of neutral way to talk about this instance. I was able to demonstrate to him, whether you demonstrated it with his blessing or not, or you did it behind his back, doesn't matter, you demonstrated it. Again, it's a neutral way of talking about something, and you provided specifics on the results. The results of this new way of data entry was 25% less time, and you were able to capture something else that may be important later. And finally, you were able to finish the research ahead of schedule and save the company money, which is always important. So this is a much better way of using the SOAR method for answering that type of question. It hits all of the boxes. It makes everything that could have been a difficult situation, it turns it into a positive, not only showing you taking initiative, showing that you're able to work with other people, but showing the results that you in any capacity could potentially bring to a new place of employment. So, all right. So right now, if we were in person, I would ask you how you would answer these types of questions using the SHARP or SOAR method. So just take a minute, think about this on your own. There's really no effective way to kind of share these things, but it's important to think about how would you use the SHARP or SOAR method to answer these different questions. Go through, practice. If you have an interview coming up, or if there's a question that you kind of struggled with, you're not quite sure how you would answer it, figure out, is this a SHARP or SOAR method way that I should be answering this question? Go through, write it out, and figure out a way to kind of effectively answer the question. So again, the tell me about yourself is going to be a SHARP way. Where do you see yourself in X years is going to be a SHARP way. What are your strengths and weaknesses? Depending on how it's asked, where you kind of are in the interview, and what you're going to talk about, that could either be SHARP or SOAR. If you're talking about a specific instance that showed or demonstrated a weakness, you might want to use the SOAR method. If it's just generally talking about, the SHARP method might be more appropriate. And then again, tell me or us about a time when. That is almost always going to be a question that you're going to want to use the SOAR method to develop your answer. All right, so for the last part here, we're going to talk about now interviewing in the age of COVID. Be prepared now for a lot of interviews to be conducted remotely, whether it's phone, whether it's online using a type of video chatting or conferencing software. This is the way the world is right now, and it's probably going to be that way for a while. So it's really good to start familiarizing yourself with this type of environment and getting used to it. So the first thing you want to do is make sure you have a reliable phone and internet connection. That way you don't have to worry about things dropping out. Yes, it's technology, and technology has a mind of its own sometimes, and there are things we cannot control with technology. But again, it's one thing to make sure that you are doing everything on your end to be able to make the process as easy as possible. It's really important to familiarize yourself with popular video chatting and conferencing programs, programs like Zoom, FaceTime, Skype. They're all different. They all have different features. They all have different interfaces. And it's really important that you have a basic understanding so you're not lost during the interview, that you're not spending more time figuring out how to turn on your webcam or where to find something in a dashboard. So that can really take away from the interview. Again, you're already in a different environment than an in-person interview. Being familiar will help ease any tension, ease any issues, and facilitate the interview to move forward better. Have a dedicated space for maybe work or to do your interviews, preferably in a separate room. You want to make sure that the room is professional looking, it's clean, it's well lit. You want to make sure that you have maybe a solid color behind you, or make sure your wall is not cluttered. You want to make sure that there's not plants everywhere or kids' toys on a desk. You want to make sure that it's a place where you feel comfortable doing the interview, and there's nothing that's going to be distracting for the person or people on the other end who are going to be asking the question. It definitely is something that needs to be worked on. It's definitely something that we're all adjusting to, but these are just some good habits. Some programs such as Zoom allow for a background overlay that you can then put up to kind of block everything. Those are okay. Just be aware, depending on where, if you're moving your head or something, there might be some different pixelizations that occur that can be a little bit distracting. But if it's the best way you feel to eliminate any of the background visuals that may be coming through your webcam, that's perfectly acceptable to do. Inform roommates, family members, friends, anybody who's with you that you're going to be doing an interview, and try to limit those distractions as much as possible. However, we are in this new age of a lot of people are working from home. A lot of kids are doing school from home now. So it is definitely a different dynamic, and a lot of people have that understanding that there's only so much we can control. If you can, keep children and pets in a separate room for the time being. If you're lucky enough to have somebody at home with you that can watch them or keep them occupied, that would be great. But it is possible that a small child may knock on the door or run into the door because they wanted to show you something, and it might make a noise, or it's going to happen. Make sure you address it with anybody on the other end. Just say, "Oh, I'm sorry, something happened with my child," and it's okay. You know, we can get back to what we're talking about. My husband or is taking care of it. Or you may even say, can you excuse me a moment? Something serious might have happened. Bring it up in the beginning of the interview. That's okay to do. Say, oh, it's great to meet you. You know, as you can see, I'm working from home right now, and I got my kids running around, and you know, I've done my best to seclude myself, but you never know with children. So you're just informing them in the beginning that you know, there may be a potential noise or potential distraction you might have to deal with. And again, a lot of them are going to be understanding at this point, but you're trying to do everything you can to prevent that from happening. Be prepared for multiple interviews now. There may be, you know, 1 or 2 phone interviews. There may be 2 or more video or online interviews at this point, because it's hard sometimes to gauge a person over the internet. Sometimes it's hard if you need to do examples or give presentations, provide documents and things, that there can be issues with that may be needed to be pushed off to another time to do that. So just be aware that you may be inclined to have more interviews for the same position than you would before. It's okay to ask for a test session. You can reach out to the person who may be interviewing you, or the group or their HR, and just say, I know that you're using Microsoft Teams for this interview. I've never used it before. Is it possible that we can have a run through, or if you can point to me to anybody that could help me to make sure that I understand everything? That's perfectly acceptable to do. Again, you're taking initiative, you're showing interest, you're trying to do everything you can to make sure that you are prepared for this. You can also ask a friend to help you, or a family member to help you with this. Try and make sure that you're using 2 different internet connections, just to see if there are any issues in bandwidth, anything with uploads, download speeds, things like that that you can try and just be aware of up front. You kind of want to make sure that everything is working properly, everything is functioning, you're familiar with everything. So try out the different features if you have the ability to just make sure that you're aware of any potential issues, and then maybe are able to even offer a solution, because it might be that, you know, somebody's new on the other end who has to run this and is not quite sure what they're doing either. So whatever, again, you can do to speed the process along, you know, to make it a better experience is going to be best. Still dress professionally like you were going to an in-person interview. You want to dress for success. You want to look the part, and while you are could potentially be at home doing this, they might not be. Excuse me. They may be at their work. They may be, you know, still in their business clothes, requiring to come in like that, and they're expecting that you would do the same thing. So you still want to look and dress professionally, regardless of where you are, even if you're doing an online interview. As I said before, inform the interviewer of any potential distractions at the beginning of the interview. Many are understanding. Many might be dealing with the same distractions, depending on what their circumstances are. So they may be more understanding for your plight, or you may need to step away for a moment just to deal with something. So keep eye contact as much as possible by looking into the camera. I do it. Everybody seems to do it. We all want to look at the webcams. We may get distracted on the screen, but you're trying to really train yourself, and sometimes it'll take a few times to really just stare into the camera, so that you're making that eye contact. You're not getting that same experience that you would in an in-person interview, where you're going to be making eye contact all the time. And so you're trying to want to keep it up as much as you can. There are going to be times that you're not going to be looking at the camera directly. That's okay, but you know, the more that you can keep eye contact, the more the better it'll feel for everybody. It'll feel more like an actual in-person interview, and it makes just the environment a little bit better. If you have the ability to, ask for the contact information for the person who you will be interviewing with, or somebody else within the organization, and try to get the phone contact information. It could be that the day that you're interviewing, some storms roll through and knock out your power, and you can't get on in time for the interview, you want to be able to let them know, hey, I'm sorry, I lost power. Can we reschedule? Or the program isn't working, and it might be the fact that there was an outage with the Skype or FaceTime or something like that during your time. So you want to be able to have an alternate way of getting in touch with the person or somebody at the organization or the company that you're interviewing for, to let them know of any issues that come up. Your child might have fallen and broken their arm 10 minutes before, and you have to take them to the hospital. Again, it might be a better way to just to call them and say, I'm sorry, I can't do this. I'm on my way to the hospital right now. And I'll reach out via email once I know more of what's happening. So. All right, so now we're going to wrap up. So just some things to think about in our summary. While your resume is your brand, the interview is your pitch. So the first thing that they're going to do is look over your application, look over your resume, and get a feel for who you are. That's where you're kind of describing yourself. That's kind of the visual that you're giving them of who you are. That's kind of your brand. This is what they know. The interview is your pitch. Why is your brand important? Why is your brand the best brand for what they want? That's where you're going to be able to start discussing things and explaining things that will help you, or maybe explain things that might be a little bit vague on a resume or cover letter. So there are two separate pieces of you, but they are also should complement each other. So in the same line, be familiar with all aspects of your resume and be able to pull on different experiences to highlight your skills and accomplishments. If they're asking for something that really doesn't relate to the current job or the last job you had, go back in your history and showcase different things that you've done or you've learned. It shows that you've grown as a professional. You've grown in maybe a specific career or a field. So being able to show that advancement is good as well, and just as important. Use the SHARP and SOAR methods when appropriate to provide powerful answers. So you can go on to a lot of variety of places and look at, like, the top 10 most common interview questions and something like that, and then look at the answers and things like that, and kind of figure out what methods might work for you and how you want to structure your answers. And always stay positive and gracious. Always put yourself in a positive light. Always keep the conversation positive and moving forward. And always be appreciative for them taking the time to interview you. Thank them. As I said, you can thank them at the end of the interview. You can thank them 2 days later in a follow-up. And then if you don't hear anything again, thank them 2 weeks later. You always want to be gracious and show that you are still interested, and that you're that you're a positive person, and you're the best for the job. All right, so that is everything that I have for you. I'm glad to take your questions now. So please, if you have any questions, you can type them in the questions box in the dashboard. They will get sent to me, and I'd be happy to answer them. All right. If after the interview I decide the job would not be a good fit, is it still important to follow up? Advise on what you would say to a potential employer regarding this situation. So yes, you may be learning that it's not the right fit for you. It could be that the money's not there. Maybe you found out what the salary was, or they told you and they say, we want to offer you this. Here's the salary that we're willing to offer, and if it's not something you're willing to take, you can decline. And if you want to do that in a follow-up email, you're more than welcome to do that. If you think about it a little bit more, or your life circumstances change and it's just not the right fit for you anymore, you can certainly contact them via email and say, I really appreciate your time and effort in interviewing me. After further consideration, I just don't think this is a great fit for me. I would like to withdraw my application. I wish you the best in your search. And that's it. So that's a very appropriate and professional way to handle that issue. What is the current reference check process? Are references still checked via phone calls? I have been unemployed for several years and some past references are unavailable. Can I use personal references? Suggestions appreciated. So I am not a hiring manager at this point. So I don't know exactly what the process is. I can tell you that my wife, who does a lot of the hiring for her job, she still calls references. But a lot of places might send an email. If you provide an email address for references, which a lot of places ask you to do, they may email that person like a survey to fill out that is the reference check at that point. So, but it's both. There's phone calls, and then there's usually some type of maybe digital communication where they're asking for information. If your references are unavailable, then you don't want to put them down at that point. It can be hard if you're unemployed. However, if you do volunteer work, or you're involved in other groups or organizations, those are perfectly acceptable professional references to put down. If you don't have really any current employers. And I mean, that's okay. If you haven't been employed in 5 years, and your last employer is no longer in business, or you had a falling out, it's okay that that you can put you do not wish to contact this person on online applications. They may ask you for your last supervisor, may we contact this employer? You can say no, and that's perfectly acceptable. I have done it. I had a falling out before. And while I work there, I asked that they do not contact that employer, because I didn't know what they were going to say. And I didn't trust them. Even though I didn't do anything wrong, and I left on good terms, I just did not want them contacting the employer for some reasons, and that's okay. You're really trying to find who would be the best references for the job that you're applying for, and those can change depending on what you're applying for. And they may ask you for personal or professional references. If you are low or lacking for professional references, you can call them and say, I applied for this, or I want to apply this for this position. You're asking for some professional references. Here's my status. Can I give you some personal references instead? They may say yes, they may say no, but they will usually let you know if they want professional, personal, or some type of combination of references. And they may give specifics. They may say that they want personal references that aren't a member of your household. They may say they want professional references that don't include supervisors. So you really have to be careful about and make sure you're providing what they ask for. Let's see. Do you have a quick example how to nicely answer why someone has been unemployed for a while or changing careers? Sure. I mean, a lot of people take time off to raise kids, and that's perfectly acceptable. I was working for 5 years, then I had my children, and I really wanted to spend some time with them, and so I took some time off. And now that they're older, I'm ready to continue my career, to start my new career, and I'm really motivated. I'm really eager to get started. Um, that's perfectly acceptable. Maybe it was because of a disability or an injury that you had, that you needed time off to recuperate from, or for whatever reason there was an extended leave of absence. It's okay to be honest with somebody for why you were unemployed. But again, you don't want to provide more information than needed. It can be a difficult balancing act, because sometimes you don't want to provide, your age or anything about your personal life, but sometimes it might come through in how you answer. They might infer things based on date ranges of when you graduated college or how long you've been employed, and so it can be kind of hard to deal with that. But you can be example, or you can be honest about why you've been unemployed. Again, it's your choice. It doesn't mean that you're not a worker. If it's I've been unemployed, because I just didn't want to work, we don't want to say that. You should have a valid reason why. Should you stand for interviews? I don't think so. You can sit for interviews. At this point, you don't need to stand. It's perfectly acceptable to sit. They're probably going to be sitting. So you would be sitting in a normal interview. If you're giving a presentation, if they're asking for a presentation part, you're going to be sharing your screen probably. So again, you can be sitting down. You don't need to stand for virtual interviews. that's not something that would be accepted. Is it okay to ask general fun, appropriate, non-related questions to the interviewer if time allows? Maybe show some of my personality and common interests. Um, Generally, uh, it is suggested to stay away from that unless it's something that the interviewer brings up maybe at the end, or maybe in the beginning, as a way to kind of set the mood. You'll be able to kind of feel out the person who's interviewing you to see if it's something that you would want to maybe talk about a little bit more, but it's not something that you should prompt or you should start those conversations. Follow their lead. You know, if it's the end of the interview and they want to bring something up before they saw something and they're like, oh, well, that seems really fun that you work for Habitat for Humanity. Like, where have you been? And you say, well, maybe I went to Mexico to help. Oh, I've been to Mexico before. It was really nice. Where did you go? What did you see? What do you think about the food? Like, that's okay. It's okay to do that as long as it's not, in the middle of the interview, if it's not taking away from you answering questions or, um, you know, or getting to the heart of why you're there. You're not there to talk about your trip or what the fun you have or your interest you have. You're there to apply for a job and argue why you're the best candidate for the job. If there's things that come up, you can pursue them, but again, make sure that you're not the one bringing it up. If it's appropriate, use your best judgment. If it's appropriate, you can kind of indulge the conversation a little, but you just don't want to start going word vomit and just go off and off and off and off and off, even if you have the same interest. Again, you're not there for that. If you know the organization will be making a decision quickly, is it okay to send a follow-up email the same day that you are interviewed? You can. It's not. It won't be looked bad upon. They're not going to dock you for being too persistent. It's generally the way the general etiquette was 2 days after, just because they may be interviewing all day, the day that you interviewed, the day tomorrow. And so, they're focused on other things right now. And but if you feel that it's appropriate, again, use your best judgment. And maybe you hit it off really well with the people or person that was interviewing you. You felt like you're pretty confident. You felt like you did a good job. Sure. Afterwards, maybe towards the end of the workday, you can send a follow-up email, just again thanking them for their time. You really appreciated the opportunity to talk to them, and you look forward to hearing from them soon regarding your future at wherever. Again, you're staying positive in that way. That's something that I do on cover letters or in follow-up emails. I always say, I look forward to talking to you. I look forward to discussing my future at, not my potential future, not talking to you later. Again, you're showing confidence in yourself that you are there for that job. You're the best person for that job, and they should give it to you. So. Any other questions? All right, well, this program was recorded, and I will, once it is up online, I will send everybody a link to the recording. I will send everybody a link attachment for the handouts. There will also be a recap that I'm going to write up that's going to talk about everything that we went over today, and look for that in the next few days. And if you have any questions, I will include my contact information. You can certainly email me directly. I'd be happy to help. If you're looking for further resources, I will make sure that everybody gets the Career Connections link. But there are so many resources out there regarding interviewing, from Indeed, Career Builder. I'm sure the New York Times and other places, they've all done exposés on that. Business magazines might do that. There are so many resources out there. So a simple search of interviewing skills or the top 10 questions, you can find a lot of information out there to help you go through. So, and again, look around. There are places. Unfortunately, Career Connections their one-stop centers are not open for to go over mock interviews and do things, but there are nonprofits, sometimes community colleges will do mock interviews and things like that. So there are ways for you to practice and develop these skills. So if nobody has any further questions, I would then like just to thank everybody for attending today. I appreciate you, your time, listening to me, and really keeping our programming moving forward, especially since we can't do this in the library, and sometimes virtual programming can be a little bit different than in person. So again, thank you everybody for attending. Be safe, be well, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.